All right, so my major at RV has been film studies and digital media. So suffice it to say, I think about movies a lot. I love movies for all different kinds of reasons. I know you guys probably do, but I feel that in general, a lot of people only look at movies as good or bad, whether they're acting or their stories are good. But in all honesty, I feel that there's so much more to the movies that beyond their story and their characters, and I think that there's a lot of redeemable aspects about a movie. You may hate it, but there might be something that you like about it. Today I'm here to basically present various different aspects of movies that you probably don't really think about. They include cinematography, production design, sound, and editing. Okay. So before I delve deeper into this presentation, I just want to go over a few vocabulary items to just so everybody's sort of on the same page. Probably the two most common things you'll hear me say in this speech are a shot and cut. A shot is basically an uninterrupted piece of film, has a beginning and an ending. A cut is basically, it's the most instantaneous transition between one shot or between two shots. It's exactly where one clip ends and another begins. So, okay, great. So the first topic is production design. Production design, also known as set design, is basically the construction of sets. A set is basically like a location that they film, whether it's an actual location, which usually they refer to as on location, like we're on location. But more often than not, sets are either in a sound studio, like a big warehouse that a company owns, basically because it's to control the elements. Like you don't have as much control over the wind and the lighting when you're outside. So let's see. You can click that link. So the following clip is from the movie Team America. I know I'm not being too classy here, but I tried to keep it varied. This is just a scene. This sort of scene sort of sets up I'll let you guys watch and then I'll explain. All right, you can stop it. So even though that was like a miniature set, it was still a set. It's something that it's still something that somebody had to build, and I was watching the behind the scenes video, and it's crazy. Like you could see in that video there was so much detail. Everything was miniature, but there was so much attention to detail in every aspect. You saw people walking around, you saw props and objects. And really, production design, I think, in general, it really does help establish the setting. I mean, you can't really call your movie a sci-fi epic if you don't have a science fiction setting or something like that along those lines. So that really kind of helps establish the environment and the setting. Without it, kind of the rest of the story. I mean, it doesn't totally depend on it. A lot of movies are set in modern day real settings. But I mean, still, even then, you have exotic settings like Morocco and other places like that, that we here in New Jersey, well, we don't really see. So it kind of creates the illusion, or almost like a fantasy, in that sense. And that's kind of what movies are all about, taking you out of reality and putting you in the mindset of this story. The bottom image below is from the movie Hocus Pocus. The reason I went with this one is it shows both. It's kind of hard to see, but it shows both the costumes and the the set design. I didn't mention it earlier, but I kind of grouped them together because, set design, costumes are something that we don't really think about, and it's something that somebody actually had to make. They had to pre-plan ahead of time. Okay, this is what the story dictates. What kind of costumes should we have? And both terms kind of apply to this French term, mise en scene, which is originally a stage term that they used. It's French, but it basically referred to the placement of everything in the scene. And I feel those kind of those are kind of, like I said, they set up the scene. Without them, it kind of destroys a sense of realism. Although maybe you're not going for a sense of realism, but there's it's kind of hard to see, but there's a lot of detail. You have their crazy medieval looking costumes. You have candle wax and cobwebs, and you see like this little girl's like chained up or like tied up to like a chair. Even her nightgown is kind of. Oh, which one? The right and the left, or one on the right? Okay, sorry. So now you can see a lot more detail. I'm sorry that picture was kind of dark. But that actually kind of leads me into my next slide. Are you guys good? Okay. So again, that's kind of like something that we don't really think about, but again, it's a huge part of movies because like we don't really think about it, but it's always there. One movie that I really like is Predator 2 on a side note, but it's because like the city of Los Angeles, even though it's supposed to be set in the future, although the movie's made in 1990, it's like so over the top, like 80s, like it's like has so much like personality to it. And it's just like I feel like I could like the Panama one, I feel like I could just go in and like explore the place. So and yeah, you can go. So cinematography, it's probably a term you guys hear a lot. Even like I never knew what it was before, but cinematography is. It's two parts. It's the lighting that they employ for a certain scene or just in general a movie. Like sometimes they have different, they have like a sort of a consistent theme throughout type of lighting. And then it's also camera angles. Camera angles also include like the camera position, like how far away the camera is from the subject. This shot here is taken from Bride of Frankenstein. This is a medium close-up. It's basically from the chest to the head up, so kind of like you're more in focus than you were if you were in a medium or like a wide shot. I typically like to think of like the close-up is sort of like you're almost whipping out the big guns when you're using it because that's kind of a very important tool for displaying emotion. Most often in scenes, like particularly conversations, is they start like a little wide and then they slowly move in with editing. But also another thing I'd like to talk about before I move on from this image is the lighting in it too. One thing that they used to do in the 1950s a lot is I think they still do it today, but it's particularly prevalent in the 1950s and like that early or post like that kind of time for black and white. Was that they would do something called backlighting, which typically refers to just like lighting the background, but on an actor, it's typically, it kind of creates, like for her, the light you can tell like on the top of her head is coming from above and slightly behind her. It's something that we don't really think about, but subconsciously it's kind of creating the illusion that she's supposed to be like an angel or angelic. It's almost like a halo, and there is sort of combined with the softness of like the lighting on her face and just in general, it does kind of create this almost like dreamy, angelic sense. This other image is from Planet Terror. Again, not too classy, but it's a similar setup, but also leaves differently. Unlike this one with, unlike this shot, which is a medium close-up, this is more of a long shot or a wide shot. That's basically when the whole body is in. The whole body is in the like you can clearly see the whole body within the frame. So this shot is kind of like the opposite of this one here. Not simply because it's in color, but again, it's a wider shot. You can see more of them. But it also uses backlighting for a different reason. Again, this one's kind of dark, so I might just turn off the light just for a minute. But the only real source of light that you can see is like the lamppost. And the two subjects there, the two people, you can't really see them too well. You can only kind of like see their outline. You can make out some detail. But in combination with like the lighting, it kind of creates this, and the fact that they're sort of isolated in the middle of the frame creates this sort of sinister feel. So those are two ways that lightings can be, or lighting methods can be metaphorical, like and also subliminal. But this last image is taken from Hobo with a Shotgun. Good movie. I like it a lot. But lighting can also be used suggestively in the sense that it set design. It can create an atmosphere. So the lighting isn't particularly. It's kind of strong in some areas, but like on the one side you have like a heavy pink neon, and then the right side you have like a heavy blue neon. But apart from those light sources, it's still kind of dark. In general, that kind of creates this sort of urban setting. In fact, the movie is supposed to be sort of like a parody of those like movies from the 80s where like a stranger would come into like a corrupt city and like kind of clean it of the environment. So it has like this really kind of like crazy like almost like 80s. I can't really explain it too well. You have to see the whole movie, but it definitely kind of has like this 80s vibe with like the crazy neon lighting. So in general, lighting and camera angles. Well, also the camera angle on this is one thing they'll tell you a lot in film school, is that an angle, like a shot taken from below a subject looking up at a subject, creates the illusion that that subject is more has more dominance. And the opposite holds true. It's a shot taken from below or above a subject looking down at a subject creates the illusion that the subject is less powerful. So here, one of the female leads, she's sort of giving the speech to like this angry mob, and that looking over her shoulder, it kind of does create the illusion that they're beneath her, that they're kind of under, not necessarily under her power, but they're kind of like, they're paying attention to her. She's definitely the dominant force in the scene. But in general, lighting can be useful because it creates not only mood, but can also be used for metaphorical purposes, subliminal purposes that we don't necessarily think of when we're watching a movie. So I'll turn, oops, yeah, okay, you can go. So sound is really a big subliminal part. It's like a big support part that we really don't think a lot about in movies. Partially because light does travel faster than sound, so it's a lot easier to just simply like look at something and instantly see what it is rather than kind of listen for it. I mean, it's a small difference. We really don't notice it, but that's kind of the general principle of it. Sound is sound is divided into three main categories in general for film. There's voices, which is like very general, like we all know what that kind of is, like just people speaking. And then we also have sound effects in music. The clip I have here is from Carrie. It's a good use of basically just showing like how effective sound can be, and like also the absence of sound in a movie, like helping to create or subliminally advancing the story, or at least creating like a sort of connection with the characters in the story. Mm-hmm. You can click it. Yep. Alright. Oops, that's good. It's kind of hard, like you probably don't notice it at first, but I've watched it several times. It's actually really interesting because the sound like sort of fades as soon as like the bucket or the blood hits her, Carrie White, and it creates this illusion that like all the sound is draining from the world, and that subconsciously kind of puts you in her mindset, like it kind of gets you to identify with her. But it also, by only having the sound of like the bucket and the blood after spilling on her, it does kind of force you to focus more on their the facial expressions in the audience. Like you could see the one girl was like laughing hysterically, but like you couldn't hear her, and it kind of created this. Also, it created this this sort of nervous, like this sort of tension. Like everybody knew like what had happened was terrible, except for like the one girl who was obviously didn't care. But that's like one way that sound can be really useful in films. It's something that again we don't really pay attention to because of how like more visual of a media that film is. And then the second clip I have is from the movie Ink, and it's actually just sort of like a little snippet of the orchestral part of the movie. It's another part that we don't really hear. It's not, again, it's very movies are very visual, so we really don't pay attention to much of sound. It kind of seeps in, but it does create the sense of atmosphere, like lighting and then the costumes. Alright, you're good. So, I mean, that's a little snippet of the whole song, but you get the general idea of like that the mood that song was creating was sort of like depressing and sad, but also kind of hopeful, and that's sort of what the intended that's what the director intended the sound to be, like to create that mood. Without it, I wish I could have shown you the whole thing, or at least that scene, but I couldn't really find too many good qualities of it. But it's a good movie, and it's really like it does create that illusion that there's sort of like this hopelessness, but there is like this little glimmer of hope. Again, that does kind of create the, like, if you had seen the scene, you probably wouldn't have noticed the music. But since I showed it to you just like basically the audio, it kind of made you focus more on like the actual tone that the music was setting. Without it, you probably wouldn't have recognized it immediately. I mean, the back of your head, you probably would have heard it, but it definitely accentuates a mood and a tone that the scene is setting up. So those are two examples of how sound can be useful in movies and how it can really like alter, can really change a movie drastically. If you've ever watched a movie muted, it's kind of bizarre. It's not bizarre per se, but it's just very different because it's like there's absolutely no sound. And especially for horror movies, if you're watching a horror movie with like no sound on, it's like it's not scary at all. So okay, you can go. The last part I want to talk about is editing. Editing is different from editing in film is different from editing in literature, where in literature it's all about going back and going over your mistakes or the mistakes that somebody else made. But for editing in film, it's all about taking the shots and the footage you have and arranging it in sort of a story. Again, it's really something that a lot of people don't notice, but it's actually a really interesting topic, at least I find it is, because there's so much like you can do with it. Most movies typically, like in general, most movies tell their stories in chronological order, where it's like A is the beginning, B is the middle, and then C is the end, and it goes in like from A to B to C. But there are some movies that kind of play around with it. That like one movie, like probably the most famous one would probably be Pulp Fiction, where it tells its stories. It's a series of separate stories, but they're told out of order. So you'll see some characters, one character dies in one scene, but you see him throughout the rest of the scene, like in the last scene too. But I saw another one this semester called, for whatever reason it escapes my mind, but it's a similar setup where the whole thing is basically a series of interviews and sort of found footage. The whole thing is basically set up like somebody trying to gather information to present a documentary on like what happened between this woman and her husband. Like, did she kill him or did she not kill him? But that's just, I think those are the really more interesting movies, and definitely some of my favorite. I can't really show you any scenes from those kind of movies because you really have to see a bigger chunk of the movie rather than a 30-second clip. But there's really so much I could talk about with editing. But the two clips I have, the first one is from The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, and then the second one is a student film that I made. But they kind of show you that there's a lot you can do with editing and creating like a different type of pacing and the rhythm of the actual scene. We can watch the first one. That's good. You're good. So again, like with sound, you probably wouldn't notice the editing because it was sort of, a lot of different elements came together to kind of pull you out of your seat and sort of into the movie, or at least the scene. But as you can see, it started there with like close-ups of like their faces, but then it gradually, or it kind of went from that to extreme close-ups of like their eyes, and that along with the frequency of the cuts, it created like this really fast pace and like this really tense atmosphere along with the music. So that's like that's sort of like one way of editing. Like the more cuts you have in a specific amount of time, like a higher frequency of cuts, it creates the illusion that like something's really happening. This is pretty much in every action movie or every action scene you can think of, where like it's like a bunch of different shots taken from different angles, but like they're cut together really quickly, so it creates the illusion of like subconsciously you're thinking like, oh crap, something's happening. But the second clip I have is sort of the alternative. It's a different style of editing. It's a slower pace, as you'll see, if it'll open. Alright, that's good. So right there, even like it's about the same length, that clip, or at least close to it, but you generally got the sense that it was a lot slower paced, there wasn't as much going on, but that was basically through the editing. So like I had fewer shots and over a longer period of time, so that did create the illusion that like it's kind of unexciting, kind of boring. That's basically like the opposite end of the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of that clip, in terms of you can have editing that when it's really fast and like really cut together really quickly, it creates it definitely creates a much faster pace, whereas if you have fewer cuts within a certain amount of time, it creates a slower pace. Really, I've only just scratched the surface on everything, especially editing. I could talk probably about like 30 more minutes on it, but I know you guys don't have that time, and in general, I think that movies are they're systems basically. They're a series of parts that, when we're operating together, they create a desired medium. In the case of movies, it is pretty much all about stories, but there's so many elements that are like, even if your story's not great, there's so many elements that could potentially like be amazing. I'm not asking you guys to be like film masters or anything like that. I know I'm certainly not. Like I usually, when I first watch a movie, I just like blank out and just like let my mind take a back seat and just watch it. I don't really pay attention to all that stuff. It's usually like on a second or third viewing that I'm more into it. And I'm not expecting you guys to do that either. But I just hope that maybe like, if you go, I'm actually going to say go home and watch a movie that you like, and whether or not you follow these things, just watch a movie. Watch as many movies as you want. If you get in trouble from another teacher for not doing homework, just blame it on me. It's okay. I'll take all the blame. But whether or not they accept it, that's up to them. But I hope you guys learned a little bit, and that's a wrap. All right, I will entertain any questions you guys have. Jackie?
Are you majoring in film?
Yes, right now I am a digital media and film studies major.
So have you ever taken the class Film Appreciation and Analysis?
Yes, I did. I took that fall 2010, but I think, yeah, fall 2010. Who did you have?
I'm taking it.
Oh, you are? Okay. I had Lou Winter. She's a little iffy. Like, she's a little crazy, but there's not a whole lot of work in that class. It's just like watching the movies and then maybe taking a few quizzes. But
Analyzing?
yeah, that hopefully that'll give you an idea of what to expect.
You did awesome.
Thanks. You in the back?
Yeah. Are you like planning on going into the film
Industry?
industry?
I would like to. I have thought about it. Right now, I do need a lot more work. I need to be more hands-on. I'm kind of lazy right now. it's a lot easier to do nothing over your summer break than to do something. But yeah, I would definitely like to either get into filmmaking or maybe film criticism. So, yes, editing probably that's probably the big one. Like if you're a film student, automatically everyone will ask you if you want to be a director. I'm actually terrible at directing people. That student film I made, like half the time it was like my friend would suggest something that like wasn't exactly what I meant, but I was like, yeah, you just go with it. So I'm not a great director, but I think editing is kind of fascinating, and it really is the backbone of a film. Without it, it's kind of your film can fall apart if you have like terrific actors, but you have like it like just crap all over the place. It doesn't like tell a cohesive story. Then it's probably not going to be left. But then again, there's plenty of different things to love about a movie. So, yeah.
I was in Sergio Leone.
Really? Which one?
Once Upon a Time in America.
Oh, really? Okay. Interesting.
Just background, but
Okay.
cool because they actually put together a whole set
Mm-hmm.
to create the Lower East Side. Do you know the film?
I haven't seen it, but I've heard of it.
And, yeah, I guess it was made, what, in the late 80s? I can't remember, but, or mid-80s. But they created a whole set of the Lower East Side of New York, like turn of the century 1900 Lower East Side. Where they did it, they put the facades of buildings. They had these Italian artisans, these artists come in and
Yeah.
they paint these facades.
Yeah,
in
matte
Williamsburg,
paintings.
Brooklyn. So what they did is they bust this from Manhattan,
Mhm.
across the Williamsburg Bridge, and into Brooklyn, and it was, it was cool.
Mhm.
I was also in Moonstruck.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Now,
With
you won't see me in Once Upon a Time, but you do see me. There's a shot where they. Have you seen Moonstruck?
I haven't. I've only seen parts of it, but some more with Nicolas Cage and Cher, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll-
We're going to the opera.
Okay.
That's the Met. The Met in Lincoln Center.
Okay.